Earlier this summer, CBC Saskatchewan spoke to Molly Thomas about her visit and subsequent documentary about Iraq. Thomas is a journalist who was born and raised in Regina but now lives in Toronto and covers international stories. She recently spent time in the Middle East talking to Syrian refugees about their plight, and she put together a documentary on the topic. We reached Molly Thomas in Toronto. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, excited to talk to people from back home.
Where did you go to interview the Syrian refugees you spoke with?
We went into Jordan. So, Jordan has it has over 1 million refugees, but only about 600,000 officially registered. But for a small country, that is a big deal. And so we decided to go into Jordan and meet some of these people, meet some of these students and young people that are affected. Half of all Syrian refugees are under the age of 18. So you can understand the demographic is very young. And so we really wanted to tap into those stories and meet some of these people and see how civil war and destruction in their own country is affecting them 5 years into the conflict.
So why did you hone in specifically on students, or at least people of that age?
I think that stat for me was the biggest thing, right? Half of all Syrian refugees under the age of 18. To me, that's a ticking time bomb if we don't consider what opportunities are available for students and young people. And I'm actually a student as well at the Monk School of Global Affairs. And I had a chance to put some research into this and to look into who is affected by the Syrian refugee crisis and seeing the children and seeing the young students like myself, Garth, other students that are in university that are just trying to pursue their goals and their dreams, and you start to see the situation for them, and 5 years out of the classroom is a big deal. That's when most students go to school for the first time. That's usually the opening of possibilities and amazing opportunities, and instead you have university students, sitting around with nothing to do. And so the more I looked into the education crisis, it really did seem like a crisis to me. International organizations, they are providing primary and secondary education for Syrian students. So up to 18, you have education. However, after that, there's really no formalized options. And because of that, many parents are saying, hey, what is the point of having my kid in school? They can work under the table, they can, bring money to the family, they can do other things, and that hope is dwindling. And that's why I really wanted to focus in on this story, because I felt like the world needs to know that this hope is dwindling and we can be a part of changing that.
Was this part of the trip that had you visit Iraq as well?
Yeah, it was. So we went to Iraq at the same time. Our show, Context with Lorna Dewick, has been really focused on refugee and IDP, internally displaced people, basically people running from ISIS or other conflict zones within their own country. And, we just felt that these were really important stories to tell. And we also, I've been a news anchor. I was in a news anchor chair for 2.5 years. And I spoke about ISIS every day, Garth. Almost every single day we talked about ISIS in the news, but I could count on my hands how many times we actually heard from a person affected by ISIS. And that, to me, is the saddest thing when we're doing media and we're telling stories, because we only tell half the story. And so when we had a chance to go into these different communities, to go into Iraq and to hear just from people on the ground, what has life been like when you run away, when you move 3 different times? What is life like when you cross borders into a foreign country and you don't know where your next meal comes from? I was very honored that these people would sit down, that they would share their stories. It was, life-changing for me too, and very honoring for me just to sit down and humbled enough that people would share what they went through.
Can you share one of the stories that really sticks with you?
There's a Syrian refugee girl in Jordan, and I met her at school, at one of the UNICEF schools there. And she was so happy-go-lucky when I met her. She's like kind of the jokester of the group, and just very congenial. And I really enjoyed her, and I knew she'd be an interesting interview. And we were chatting, and she was telling me how she wanted to be a fashion designer and how that was her dream. And she's only 17, so she knows that school is coming to an end. At least formalized options are coming to an end. And once we started, getting past, I guess, the surface level things, I just asked her, I started, how do you actually feel? How do you feel about school ending next year? What do you think about the future? And she just looked at me, and she said, I sit here with a smile, but inside we are all sad inside. And there was something about that is just so, it has to affect you. This is a 17-year-old. Why should they have to think of life like that?
Mm-hmm. It's been a few months since you were there, Molly. What goes through your mind as the Syrian refugee crisis keeps escalating and we see these such moving images? What goes through your mind having actually met some of these people and gotten to know a few of them?
I just think, I look at all the different strategies that are coming out. Since the Alan Kurdi photo kind of rocks the world, the little boy on the beach. But I think that people just need to remember, how can we make a difference? And I look at Canada's strategies even. I'm glad Canadian politicians are finally paying attention to this issue that's been raging on for 5 years. And I think that as voters in Canada especially go to the ballot box, they have an opportunity to leverage what they want done for this crisis. And so I'm happy that there's an expedited process now for 10,000 refugees coming into our country quicker. But I would really love to see a targeted response for students, because I think when you sit down with university students and you have these brilliant minds, by the way, Syrian university students were a very educated bunch. We're talking about 15 to 24-year-olds that had a 95% literacy rate. There was more women than men in university in Syria. And so it's a very progressive place when it comes to education, especially when you compare it with the rest of the region. And when you have brilliant minds like young engineers or doctors or lawyers that have so much to offer the world, and yet they're sitting in refugee camps or they're sitting in host communities and they're staring at the wall for hours and hours upon hours a day, and with nothing to do. They're not legally allowed to work in the country. We have to think of alternatives for them. And I think a country like Canada, a lot of Western nations, we have the opportunity to offer education, to get scholarships for these kids, to figure out a way that we can engage maybe other young people as well, that we live in a globalized world and this matters. And I think I would love to see the Canadian government more focused on students specifically, because I think that is a ticking time bomb, and I think we're not talking about it.
That's the second time you've used the phrase ticking time bomb. What do you mean?
I think that options are appealing. Other options are more appealing when you come to a point of desperation. I think when you're young and you're in a part of the world that has so many other options, military options, extremist groups, when you come to a point where you have nothing to offer and no one is caring about your plight, and you're sitting around doing nothing and you can't provide for your family, I think other options look appealing, and you can't even blame someone for that. And so I think we need to pay attention to that demographic specifically, because these are brilliant students, and their talents are going to waste. We don't want them to go somewhere else.
Molly, thank you so much.
Hey, so nice to talk to you, Garth. Always nice to talk to Saskatchewan.
Thanks again. Bye-bye, Molly.
Bye.
Molly Thomas is a journalist that was born and raised in Regina. She works out of Toronto now and has a documentary airing on Sunday. It's on a program called Context. It airs on Global Television at 9:30 Sunday morning.